Welcome to Rite Gud, the podcast that helps you write good. Many writers dream of moving to one of the big cool culture cities to make it. New York, LA, Portland, Seattle, increasingly Austin. But not all of us can live there for whatever reason. Some of us live in itty-bitty rural hamlets, and we're happy there. Some of us live in cities with a terrific cultural scene, but the city gets overlooked for being in a landlocked state. And some of us live in terminally uncool towns, like Albany, New York. But it's not impossible to thrive as a writer outside of New York City. You can and should still pursue your art wherever you live. Joining us from Tulsa, Oklahoma, is Cassidy McCants, editor of Apple in the Dark and member of the New Haven Independent Review crew. Cassidy, what is the local art and entertainment scene like in Tulsa?
That's a great question, and thank you for having me. The current art and entertainment scene in Tulsa it's booming in a way. I think it's getting bigger. There have been many movements to make the scene bigger. It's happened in the last just few years. I moved back home to Tulsa in 2013. And I did kind of feel like there wasn't much going on. You know, at that point, I had just left my college town, which was small, but kind of happening in many ways when it comes to the arts. But yeah, we now have the Tulsa Artist Fellowship, which both brings in artists from other cities and states, and then also kind of champions some local artists. We do have a rich history and scene when it comes to local music, and Tulsa's always kind of had some gems in that regard. But I do think there's still a lot of work to be done when it comes to the literary scene. I have found some folks, and we make it work and we support each other. I think there's a hunger for more still. We are, I think, a landlocked state that is overlooked in many ways. There is some cool stuff going on, but there's a lot of room for growth still.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about why writers dream of moving to the big cities, New York City, LA. I mean, it's not all just prestige, but there is a reality that these big coastal cities do offer networking opportunities and do have thriving art communities. Being around other cool, exciting, creative people is really energizing as a writer, and it can be tough to find those. And also, there are more job opportunities out there. If you want to be a screenwriter, you're going to find more opportunities in Los Angeles than you will in, Providence or something. That's where the movies are. That's where they come from.
Yeah, I actually do have a confession. In 2021, my work was remote, so I took a chance and I moved to Seattle.
Oh, nice.
It lasted about a year, kind of until I ran out of money, because I was still making Tulsa money. But I had found a community in grad school. I've been to some writing retreats, and those are the spaces where, you're like, oh, okay, here are the people trying to do this weird thing I'm trying to do that I'm not quite getting at home. And a move like this, I was like, I will find more of this stuff that feeds me if I move to Seattle. So I certainly, right. I subscribe to that idea. Honestly, I really didn't make a single new friend in Seattle.
Oh, no.
I did have some friends there already, fortunately. And many of them are artists. So we kept each other afloat. But it was actually so interesting to me. There was a lot going on. I mean, constantly something in the literary community or, music, visual art, all of it. They have all of it. It's everywhere. But it was, of course, more difficult to kind of break into the scene. I just never found a way in, Yeah, and maybe because I'm socially awkward. Maybe, I'm not outgoing enough. But I found it interesting.
There is the big dream of moving to one of the big cities, but, it doesn't work out for everyone. and for varying reasons. I mean, number one is that it's expensive to live there, and art doesn't pay very well. So cost of living is high. The amount of money you make as an artist is very low, even if you have a job in the industry. Publishing industry jobs pay really, really poorly. So that is a practical reason for a heck of a whole lot of people. Or there's a cultural reason too. I mean, New York City has a particular culture. LA has a particular culture. And these are cultures that aren't for everyone. I'm not trying to bash it, but some people just kind of don't really feel comfortable with the LA life or something.
Just before this, actually, a good friend from grad school who's also in Seattle, found a job listing, senior editor for a very prestigious literary publication. It's like salary of $55,000 for someone living in New York City, and it's just that's kind of where that could, you can get by with that in Tulsa. But I just that seems like it opens up a very small pool of people who could do that job in New York City, people with other means. And we don't all have that, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess if you're young, if you're in your 20s or something, you can get by. You can handle living in kind of a crummy apartment with multiple roommates. But when you start getting older, it's like, no, I couldn't tolerate it. I could not handle it. I want something that's comfortable. I don't want to have to argue with somebody about who did the dishes, who didn't do the dishes. I just cannot deal with it.
Yeah, I feel like there is a time for that, and maybe certain personalities for it too, right? People who can hang with it for longer. But I think on the whole, that's a lot for someone.
Yeah, and the big dream is you live like that for a couple years, but then you move up and you make it, but that doesn't happen for everybody for whatever reason. It just doesn't.
Yep.
It just doesn't.
It seems tough out there. I mean, I think everywhere it can be difficult to find an arts gig that sustains you fully, but it especially terrifies me, the thought of trying to do something like that in New York City.
Yeah. I mean, credit to people who give it a shot, and whether you make it or not, hey, you tried, that's cool, you were brave. Respect. Totally.
And on the record, I certainly do not regret my year in Seattle. It was absolutely wonderful, and worth all of it. And
definitely.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, so for whatever reason, some of us just cannot or will not live in New York City, LA, Seattle, maybe Chicago, maybe Austin, one of those. Some of us are just gonna live where we live. And if you're an artist, well, let's focus on writing mainly, just because that's what I know. I know writing, and you're writing and editing. So if you're trying to live in one of these other cities, or maybe a small town, there are some challenges of being a writer, or making it as a writer, or living that writing life. And one of the big things is a smaller city might come with a smaller audience, which is going to mean fewer eyes on your work if you're published in a local publication, and maybe more limited funds to sustain local writing. We have local arts and culture magazines in Albany. They're largely free. I have no idea if they can even afford to pay contributors most of the time, which is understandable because it is not a big city. There's not a lot of circulation for these.
I think I'm in Tulsa because I want to be in Tulsa.
Mm-hmm.
There's also some it is much easier to be at home in Tulsa, and I do have family here, and I've kind of, my roots are here. I've laid my roots here, but there are sometimes I am angstier about some of the lack of opportunities that I perceive. Yeah. There are some opportunities, and like I said, I think they're growing. Maybe it's me getting high and mighty about it. Maybe maybe I'm being unfair, but I do think for me, the limited scene means that there's not a bunch of room for every type of way into the art. So for instance, during my time in Tulsa, I don't often introduce myself as a writer, but, if it comes up, it's kind of like immediately people go straight to, oh, you're a poet. Like, well, no. Oh, so you're a novelist. Well, no. I write short stories and, creative nonfiction, some journalism. I don't think this art scene is as ingrained in the culture and community. And so it kind of feels like, it just feels misunderstood sometimes, right? Always having to kind of explain, what it is I'm doing or why I'm doing it, and not being totally sure if there's like a true space for it here. Having fewer opportunities does mean like sometimes I'm a little bratty and I'm like, okay, there's this one group that has all these resources and they're doing the literary thing and they're doing many good things, but I am a brat and I feel like they are watering it down, for the masses. And that is me being a little shitty and judgy. But it does, it makes me just want for more, more ways in. So I'm always toying with how I can, contribute that.
Right. Right. I think I get what you mean. There's sort of a type of vibe, and it's a lot more limited. In a bigger city, there's going to be so many different sort of scenes. Like, there's not one writing scene in New York City. There's this, this scene or this little subgroup and that little subgroup. In my town, there's just like one group of people. There's just not enough people for subgroups. If you want to do subgroups, that's going to be like maybe you and your friend, which I don't know you could really call a scene. And it can be a little tough, like trying to find other writers. I mean, first of all, it's hard because writers tend to be introverted and don't really like to talk to other people in general. And secondly, if you try to meet up with local writers, if you don't like the vibe, you're out of luck.
Yeah. Totally. So I am curious, what is the population in Albany?
It's barely 100,000, I think.
Okay.
Yes, I think we're a town. It's not big.
Okay.
It's not big. And everyone makes fun of us. I was hanging out with a friend in Salem, and I mentioned where I was from. They're like, Albany? Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. And I'm just thinking, like, man, someone from a town famous for like, witch executions is making fun of me. For being from Albany. This is terrible.
Are there things you love about it, though? I mean...
Yeah. There is a lot I do like about it. It has, like, a good balance of... It's very open-minded, but also very, like, mind your own business. The pace of life is okay. It is reasonably affordable. I feel like it's a town that has a lot of potential. But there needs to be like something sort of fostering and supporting that potential. And another issue with upstate New York towns is that because of the proximity to New York City, when a town starts getting kind of cool, it gets gentrified really, really quickly by NYC developers. They like zoom in really, really fast and like buy up tons of real estate and just jack up prices and kind of turn it into a weekend home destination for wealthier NYC residents, which is a real bummer because that's like happened to Woodstock, that's happening to Kingston, it's happened... New Paltz is still kind of a college town, but it happens to a lot of the really nice, kind of cool, kind of hip little upstate towns. They just get like gentrified so quickly because we're so close to NYC, and we kind of get their runoff in a big way. So a good number of my friends who actually love Albany and love living here, like, resolutely tell anyone from any other town, this place is terrible, don't move here, just to, like, try and prevent that from happening. Like, no, this is awful. Don't come.
Yeah, it's an interesting, like, you want people to come, but you don't, right? You want the scene to be bigger, but at what cost?
Yeah, you want it to thrive, but you don't want it to, like, attract the attention of some just horrifying NYC slumlord demon who comes in and just destroys the local housing market, because I did see that happen to my hometown, and it's just tragic. Yeah,
that's a bummer, and I suppose it might be hard to combat those things once they're kind of in motion, right? I mean, it's definitely hard.
Yeah, so, it's super hard.
Yeah, but, we do what we can and hope for the best. I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. But I do feel like our town does have some kind of potential, but, you it needs a little kick sometimes. Maybe it could be. I don't know. But,
I certainly feel that. Yeah. That's...
Yeah.
Very familiar.
So that's one of the challenges, is that you get the smaller audience. It's a smaller scene to move in, which can be tough, because if you don't get along with your little local scene, you're kind of out of luck. It's a lot harder to make your own scene or find your own people, because there's just more limited people. And there's also this other reality, which is that the greater publishing world really loves stories about New York City and LA, and stories about living in New York City and living in LA, and stories about what it means to be a New Yorker, or what it means to be a Los Angelian.
Yep.
And there's not as much of a thirst for stories about, like, what it means to live in Omaha or something. Like, I can't imagine, that novel, My Year of Rest and Relaxation, I can't imagine it would have gotten half as much hype and excitement if it took place in, like, Buffalo.
Yeah.
People would just not go crazy for it, but it's like, but it's a girl being sad and napping in New York City. Yeah. You have to read this. So something that, like, My Year of Rest and Relaxation in Albany would be a harder sell.
Yeah, it is. That I do think that's very real, and I've kind of only encountered this issue more recently because I have taken it upon myself to incorporate, like an actual setting into my weird little pieces more frequently. So the settings I know are, Tulsa and Northwest Arkansas, and I do think they're the New York stories, LA stories. Oh my God. In high school, like I just read LA novels and just, imagined partying with celebrities and messing my life up, to the nth degree, and, just living in sin, right. Having all that, the beautiful beaches around me, and just, I don't know. Really, I'd certainly glamorize, the LA stories when I was young.
Right.
There is also, I think, you've got, like, I think Florida stories now are kind of finding their footing, and I think also there's a romanticized, like, South that we hear in fiction and in nonfiction, but when you're talking about these, like, community, like Tulsa and Albany, I'll assume, that aren't quite as, like, maybe don't fit as neatly into these boxes. Like, Tulsa is in the South, yes, but it's got, like, kind of a Midwestern culture, and it is in Oklahoma, but it's different from the rest of Oklahoma, but it's still got the heart of Oklahoma. And I think just the fact that a reader is not as familiar with the nuances of these locations, like, it just might not hit the same for them, but maybe we just have to, like, be stubborn about it and insist that, people kind of learn a little bit about these spaces that are not New York, Seattle, LA.
Yeah. One of our former guests on the podcast, there's a horror writer, a pretty successful one, named John Langan, and his big popular book, The Fisherman, takes place very specifically in rural upstate New York in the Hudson Valley, and it's this interesting kind of spooky Lovecraftian story that is partly about the formation of the Ashokan Reservoir, which is the reservoir that feeds New York City, and it's about this town that gets submerged as a result of it, and a lot of strange spooky things that are going on. And I love it because it was about my own, like, itty-bitty tiny town, and it's very specifically about it. It's very unapologetically about it, and recalls very real locations, and is kind of saying to this broader market, like, no, you are going to hear about New Paltz. I am going to rant about how this one very specific intersection does not have a traffic light, and you guys had better learn, because if I have to hear your jokes about, like, 25th Street and NYC, you can learn about Route 155 and how there's a very bad intersection there, okay? Just deal with it. And he made it work. He made people care. And I respect that so much.
It can be done. Yeah, it can be done. have to go for it, I guess. Like, I think my sort of hesitancy when I got into writing fiction in particular, hesitancy around having a really concrete setting did have something to do with the fact that the stories I had read were set in places so different from the places that I am actually familiar with.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, I feel like to some degree it kind of stunted my growth as a writer early on. Just like not seeing many stories about places like mine. Of course, that means, hey, maybe there's a space open for it. Like, we need more of this. And yeah, it's not, I don't think it's all bad news, but I certainly think it can kind of hinder something in a blossoming writer who's not from one of these big cities.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Or I remember I went to like a writing convention and I mentioned where I was from, and this like LA screenwriter response, "I'm sorry." Like, oh man, that was uncalled for.
Yeah.
But that guy worked for like Max Landis, so you know what? Maybe I should be feeling sorry for him.
Yeah. I mean, that's so like, does that guy doesn't really know what it means to be where you're from. Like, it's so frustrating to hear that, but you know, maybe originally he's from a small town or something. And
maybe. I don't know.
Beef. I don't know.
Some beef with Albany.
Yeah.
Someone threw a smoothie at his Cybertruck. Okay, so yeah, big local news is that someone in, I think, Troy, which is just across the river, it's capital region, bought a Cybertruck and everybody's buzzing about it. And apparently during one of the witnesses, just without a word, just hurled a smoothie directly at the offending vehicle as it was driving by. And I'm like, that's why I love the capital region, man. We just don't put up with that. That's how it is. Yeah, this is a good place.
These are the good stories. Like.
Yeah. Just hurling a smoothie. Without a word, without missing a beat.
There is one, I've spotted one Cybertruck so far in Tulsa.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a bizarre experience. Like, I didn't think to throw a smoothie, but I haven't been drinking my smoothies frequently enough anyway.
Yeah. You gotta keep a smoothie on you, just in case. Just gotta keep it on you.
I'm inspired now.
All right. So another thing that of one of these other cities of a non-coastal city or a non-big city that might make it a little tough to form an art scene or a writing scene is lack of walkable neighborhoods. Like, having a pedestrian-friendly place where people can kind of hang really does foster a lot of community and culture. Car-dependent cities can keep us isolated. Like, if you have to drive everywhere, you end up getting very focused on your specific destination for a very specific purpose. So you go to work, you go shopping, you go home. Maybe if you're going to go do something fun, you have a very specific idea in mind of like, I'm going to go to this one place and do this specific thing, and then I'm going to go home. Versus if you have kind of a pedestrian-friendly area, you might kind of like wander around and maybe you'll stumble across a bar where there's like a local band playing a gig, or maybe you'll say, oh, look, there's an art gallery that's having an opening, or, oh, hey, there's a cafe and this guy happens to be like, there's an open mic and I can hang out with the open mic people and maybe talk to some local poets or something. And that can be a huge challenge in a lot of North American cities where you don't really have the hangout place where you can just wander around and stumble upon culture.
Yeah, definitely. Tulsa is very much a driving city. It's becoming a bit more bikeable. It is very flat, so it helps that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's something, and we're working on that. But it is true that I have friends who live on the other side of the city, which, frankly, it really takes no more than 20 minutes to drive anywhere in Tulsa, which we are very lucky for.
Oh, wow.
But we're all we're brats about it. I will not go to South Tulsa unless like someone drags me there. I just it's not a pleasant experience to get down there, and I think okay, so what you've said is true. The one upside we have in Tulsa is that most of what does happen in Tulsa in the arts happens downtown, particularly in a small neighborhood of downtown called the Tulsa Arts District. And then we have like just south of downtown, we have a couple of neighborhoods that are a bit hipper. Not exactly walkable though. Like you would have to either hop on your bike or car to get to these other neighborhoods. To me, what I would love more of is, big cities have multiple artsy neighborhoods to kind of hop around. You get to this neighborhood and then you can kind of bop around and find out what's going on. The fact that it's really like kind of only downtown and the immediate surroundings, there's just not much. Like it is true, once you're kind of in the hip spot, you're in the hip spot, but but there's simply just not much to do. So, you can go downtown and you can probably find some things on the weekends.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, in terms of variety, like, there aren't many neighborhoods to choose from. We don't have, like, we have residential neighborhoods, and then we have kind of 3 spots that have things going on. And both Cherry Street and Brookside are two neighborhoods I'm thinking of in Tulsa that really, those are just restaurants, though. They don't really have the art stuff going on. It's kind of just downtown.
Yeah.
If you're willing to get downtown after work, you've got some options. It's just like, that's your only option. We don't have any other neighborhoods to go to for what we're looking for here.
Yeah, we used to have 2, and now we have 1.
Oh.
And part of the reason for that, it's not just pandemic, but we had, in I think 2012, the city put in like a noise ordinance law, a cabaret law that strictly limits local venues' ability to host live music acts. Like if you're gonna host, just a dude with an acoustic guitar playing music, you need a cabaret license now.
Wow.
And it's a real pain to get it. And that happened a little over 10 years ago, and it like devastated Albany's local music scene, because we have had historically we've had a pretty nice local music scene. There's a lot of local bands that are pretty good. There was a really terrific like rock and metal scene back in the 1980s, and this local band was in like heavy rotation on MTV. Their name was Blotto, and they're like the pride and joy of the city, Blotto from 40 years ago. And I think more recently a couple of politicians are trying to undo the damage by either reversing the law or making it easier to get the cabaret license, because recently an ESPN commentator embarrassed our town by dunking on it and calling it boring. They were like in town for some sporting event and said like, well, good luck finding anything to do on a Tuesday in Albany. And everyone, boo, how dare you, we're so outraged. But after we were done being mad, we started going like, well, you know what, they got a point there. Okay, well, maybe we can fix this.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I suppose it's not the worst criticism, and it is something that hopefully is mendable.
Yeah.
Not fun to hear, but
not fun to hear, but a necessary, being nationally shamed into fixing a law and allowing people to make music again.
Yeah.
So, we've talked a lot about the downsides, the challenges. Let's talk about some of the good parts, because there are rewards to being a writer or artist outside of one of the big hip coastal cities. I mean, one reward is that you can be a big fish in a small pond and rule your local writing scene with an iron fist. But even if you don't want to be a local tyrant, there are some kind of positive sides to it. Like, maybe you have a unique outsider's perspective instead of conforming to the latest, here's the trendy thing that's cool in NYC or LA. You're being a weirdo who doesn't fit in is actually really, really good for making innovative art a whole lot of the time.
Yeah, I think I, as frequently as possible, try to celebrate the perks of living in a place like Tulsa and being an artist, because it's not helpful to like dwell on the things I'm thirsty for here as an artist. But there really is a lot to be said for not being in one of the hot spots. Like, I've realized that the way my life has kind of shaped up in the past 12 years or so is probably thanks a lot to living in a smaller city with kind of, I mean, less competition. So when I left University of Arkansas, you know, I got my undergrad degree in creative writing, and I was always very interested in editing, and my thesis advisor, Skip Hayes, was like, you want to be an editor, you're from Tulsa, why don't you hit up Nimrod? And, you know, I'm like, okay, yeah, Nimrod, literary magazine that's been around for years and years. Actually, interestingly, my grandmother worked on Nimrod
Wow.
in the 60s, but, you know, I don't know, the possibility of that didn't ever occur to me because it just, I don't know, those opportunities just don't open up, right? But I took his advice and I emailed the editor-in-chief, Eilish O'Neill, and I interviewed with her for like a summer internship. Like, okay, I'm gonna go back home to Tulsa, you know, and hopefully this works out. And I dressed up like really fancy, and I wore makeup, which I never wear much makeup. Like, I just I just really wanted to make a good impression. And I get to the office, and it's, you know, just like a university office that's like stuffed with books, and it's like very unassuming and felt so comfortable. And I was like, oh my god, I didn't have to not be myself. That's great. I got the summer internship, which turned into a part-time job, which turned into a full-time job for many years until eventually I was laid off due to the pandemic, which is a real bummer.
Yeah.
But I just feel so lucky. Like, if this did not happen in Tulsa, like, the chances of my even getting a summer internship, I think, would be so limited. So there's that, right? Like, the opportunities that are there, I think you might have more of a shot.
Yeah. Less competition, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and in terms of just, you know, being invited to maybe read at an event, just do the kind of, like, there's some blackout poetry events I've been invited to judge.
Nice.
I've spoken with some writing groups and been paid some money to do like 6-week online fiction classes. I received all these opportunities, I think, because I am one of the few people that the people know of that are kind of doing this
Nice.
thing, right? So I feel very lucky in that way. And also I do appreciate, like you said, that I think we do come in with a different perspective when all of our we're not being directly influenced by a bunch of people trying to do the same thing, maybe, in our everyday. And so that maybe allows us to be a little more ourselves in our art, which hopefully makes it ring true and, you know, fill a space that's a little bit different. That's my hope. Yeah.
I hope so. Definitely. There is also, in some ways, a positive economic side. Yeah, okay, maybe there aren't as many big opportunities, but also lower costs of living. I mean, that potentially means being able to keep an unusual creative venue open. Yeah. Like, you can keep your grimy, weird little punk rock club open for years and years because the rent is super, super cheap. Or you can create a sort of weird communal artist living space because you can afford a former warehouse and turn it into little apartments for people to do painting. Like, these things are possible. Or just as an individual, maybe you can sustain yourself writing in a little bit of part-time work, so you're free to do more creative stuff. A lot of why New York City became this art haven that it is now is because there was a time when you could just, like, wait tables during the day and then do your cool, amazing, creative thing in the evening. You could do your part-time, boring, normal job and then have tons of time to do the creative thing and maybe make a little bit of money off of that and be able to sort of make it work and put in the time and have this community. I don't know if economically that's really viable anymore to like wait tables part-time and then, you know, do poetry or something. I have absolutely no idea. It seems impossible just by the numbers. I can't imagine making it work, but I'm sure someone manages to do that by living in a shoebox.
Yeah.
But with like a small town, maybe it'd be a little bit easier to pay the bills as a full-time writer in a way that you probably can't do in LA anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I do have a day job and it has to do with words. I am an editor, but it is very different. It's technical. It's not creative.
Yeah.
But I think financially a huge perk of living in Tulsa for me is that without hustling too hard, I do kind of now have the means to travel, you know, when I have the opportunity. Like, Tulsa is cheap to live in, and therefore we can go on vacation sometimes.
Nice.
So when I'm feeling the need for new influences or new community or something, like, you know, I can save up for maybe a retreat or a residency, or maybe just getting the hell out of town and like driving to Kansas City to like go see something different.
Nice.
That kind of shake-up is really valuable to just being a writer, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are a few different small like retreat areas within 3-4 hours of Tulsa, and I don't know, like, the money it takes to do those things is not nothing. And the fact that, you know, the lifestyle here allows me to afford those things every now and then, it means a lot. Like, that's the kind of stuff that helps to sustain me creatively.
Yeah, there's that. There's just the lower cost of living. So let's talk a little bit about making it work. Making it work as a writer. Let's focus on writing just because that's sort of more in our wheelhouse. In a smaller town or in a non-coastal city or just outside of one of the quote-unquote cool art cities. Because it is possible to make it work. And I suggest to any listeners, don't focus entirely on online networking. Online networking can connect you to the larger publishing industry, but online communities being online isn't very good for your brain. It's not good for you, and just being around other creative people, even if they're not 100% on your wavelength, can be really inspiring and really energizing in a way that, like, posting just isn't. It's not the same.
It's different. It's definitely different. Yeah. The internet does a ton for us in this regard. I do think that's true.
Yeah.
For better or worse. I don't know. I think in these smaller communities, like, for years, when I moved to Tulsa, all I did was go out to see live music, like, every single night. That was what I could get at the time, right? Like, they were not people doing what I was trying to do, but it was a constant reminder that stuff in this vein matters, and they've found community. Maybe one day I can. And, you know, I'm a writer sitting in this crowd, this folk show. Maybe there's another one. You know, like, maybe I'll meet someone who's trying to do the same thing. I really do think having people actually around you trying to do the same thing is just so validating. And then also just makes it so much less lonely, you know.
Definitely. Yeah,
finding a community, I think, no matter what way you do it, is very, very important. Just gotta make it work.
Yeah. And I mean, smaller cities, smaller towns do often have some kind of culture. It just takes a little more effort to find it. You have to, like, actively hunt for it and go and introduce yourself to people. So initially, when the New Haven Independent reached out to me to be part of the review crew, they said, can you find stuff to review in Albany? And I said, I don't know if I can. But then I started hunting and I realized, like, wait, we actually do have a pretty vibrant local music scene. There's a ton of little local bands all over the place that are pretty good. And oh yeah, there's like a local theater scene. It's small. It's mostly community theater, but people are doing that, and like, oh wow, and then there's this happening, there's this league, there is a lot of stuff, more stuff going on than I realized, and though my time with them has ended because they decided to focus on a limited number of cities, which is understandable, I'm really grateful to have had that sort of prodding for the time that I did to be like, no, we are going to go out and we are going to find culture, and it's really, really gratifying and fun, and I ended up experiencing things that I probably would not have if I hadn't done this.
Isn't that so interesting? Yeah, the New Haven Independent, that's actually a great point, because I have had very much the same experience, writing these reviews for Tulsa. Like, I've realized how much, since the pandemic, I've just kind of stopped doing things. Like,
yeah.
I thought I was a great arts citizen and literary citizen. I'm like, no, I really haven't been. Like, I've kind of holed up these past 4 years. So, I don't know. It's very cool to me, and I'm sorry that Albany lost it. By the way, that's a bummer.
Yeah, I can't blame them though, because I was seeing the page counts on my articles, and I'm like, oh no, they can't justify this. They can't justify paying me to do this anymore. Not enough people are reading these.
but it is. I mean, it's a reminder that there is some, like, sometimes there's outside funding. Like, maybe there's someone on the outside who wants to champion, what we're doing here in Tulsa. Like, that was kind of wild to me, right? Like,
yeah,
there are other avenues for this.
Yeah, I was looking through the rest of the review crew, and I was really amazed by how much was coming out of Tulsa. I mean, there's a lot of, like, really interesting theater, performance art, and a really thriving hip-hop scene, it sounds like, too.
Yes, definitely. There really is some cool stuff going on, and it's nice that someone who's not here recognized it. Even before, I think a lot of us locals did, Sometimes we kind of just get lost in our own, like, version of what our city or town is, I think, and we can be a little bit blinded to, like, some of the beauties that are actually happening all around us.
Yeah. It is possible, probably, to find some kind of cultural thing going on in your local town, and you might find yourself feeling really inspired or energized. But if you are listening to this and there legitimately isn't one, legitimately there's nothing there in your town, what that means is that you get to be the person who makes it happen, because it is absolutely possible to make it happen. It is hard. It definitely takes effort. It takes a lot of effort. It might take a little bit of investment, not a ton, but it is absolutely possible. I mean, one handy thing about our current media landscape is that publishing is a lot more accessible than it used to be. I mean, you can publish via online platform. You can pretend it's the 1990s and distribute a cheap free zine somewhere in local cafes and restaurants and whatever is there. You can do it. It's possible. It might not be super fancy, but guess what? Once you've been doing it long enough, you'll be locally known as, oh yeah, the guy who does that zine. It's that guy. And then you're that guy. Then you're, like, famous really quickly.
Yeah, and hopefully, you attract people who want to join you. Yeah, I think especially when we're feeling angsty about the lack of opportunities, that's when we need to try to get creative about how we can chip in. Though, as I've said, we've got some things going on in Tulsa. I wanted to see more of, the things that I cared about in the literary world. So, for a while I think I was just like, meh, it's not here. Like, I'm grumpy. And finally I'm just like, damn it, Cassidy, okay, you're starting a reading series. And so I did. And it does take work, but, like, it doesn't take money, really. I mean,
yeah.
I was very lucky to find a venue that did not require, me to put down any money. That's not always going to be the case. But hopefully you can find somewhere that's just like, if you're out and about on the town, you can find at least the people or the places that are willing to support your art.
Yeah.
You're likely to find some people who are excited about this kind of stuff, even if they're not actually in the literary world. They're like, oh, hell yeah, like, a poetry night sounds great. A prose reading sounds wonderful. Like, I think people are probably more excited about these things than we know. Maybe the ideas just have not been posed. So I'm all for, like, doing what you can to build it if it's not there.
Yeah. We've actually got kind of a little... A lot of my friends are involved in this little, it's almost semi-underground stand-up comedy scene. And it's just, here's the bar that hosts comedy night there. Because they'll do it because they want to host some sort of night. Sure, if you can put a sign on the door that might bring people into the place to buy chicken wings, you're golden. You can do the thing there.
Yeah.
They won't pay you. Maybe they'll give you a beer, but they will give you a space.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's really all you need to get something started.
Definitely. Yeah, I think once you kind of bop around a bit, just be open to, I don't know, I guess you think of it as like a partnership, right?
Yeah.
If you've got friends in the theater community or the music community or one of these other arts communities who have some resources to offer, like maybe they can help you out. Like maybe they have a space, maybe they have equipment, maybe they have a built-in audience who would be down to listen to something different from what they're used to.
Yeah. There are also a lot of local festivals where it might be possible to get a little table for cheaply to sell your work if you're like a local magazine person. I've noticed at a lot of local little festivals there are some local kind of indie magazine publishers who do this very, very artsy visual art and fiction magazine, and they're always selling a stack of them with stickers. Even if you don't sell a copy of the magazine, you can probably sell stickers.
Yeah.
I will buy stickers. I will always buy a sticker. Especially if it's really shiny.
Hell yeah.
Or even just starting a writing circle. It is, as a writer, it's so hard to find other writers, but when you can get a good writing circle going, it's just such a terrific motivation for writing. It just gives you so much fuel that sitting alone in your apartment won't give you, or that posting on the internet definitely won't give you most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, even if the crew you find, even if they have, like, a totally different idea of, what a story or a poem or an essay is supposed to be, just having that community there is huge. Like, you don't all have to be on the same page about what it is you're trying to create, but you're trying to write something, right? And that bonds you, and that, again, is validating. It feels so much less lonely.
Mm-hmm.
Because, damn, it can be lonely.
Yeah.
When you're not finding anyone who's, for our purposes, trying to write, that can be kind of brutal.
It can. It can be very tough. But that feeling when you do find your people, oh gosh, it feels so good.
Yeah.
And it's not impossible. People kind of wonder how you become like a writer or the local writer, and the answer is just you're the local person who keeps on writing.
Yeah.
And the thing about art is like you start doing your thing and you just sort of keep doing it until you're the guy who's known for that thing, until you're the guy who's known as like, oh, hey, you're that writer. And that's all. That's all it takes to be that writer.
Yeah.
Is that you just keep doing it until someone recognizes you, and it will eventually happen, probably.
I agree. I mean, of course, it's easier said than done. Just to keep going, right? But
just keep doing it for years in obscurity. Like, oh man,
but
that's super hard. That's really hard.
But I think you have to. I mean, I think it's kind of a hard fact, and for some, it's not going to be as much of a slog. And I think if you think about it less like I'm trying to establish myself as this, but maybe more as like I'm just trying to contribute and find my people. Eventually it is going to happen. Even in tiny towns, there are a lot of people doing a lot of different things, and you might not be as weird as you feel. You're probably not as weird as you feel. You're not the only one who cares about this thing. I have certainly felt in my life like I'm the only one who cares about this thing. What the hell? How can that be? Turns out, of course I was not. But it takes some getting to, and you gotta be stubborn, you gotta have some stamina, and that part sucks, but
yeah, but finding other people who are kind of doing this, even if it's just like let's hang out a couple of times a month and write for an hour or two, or let's just talk about books or something, like that is what keeps you going until it clicks.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, you can find people who are down for a book club. And if they don't have the same taste as you, that's fine. Take turns choosing books, and then you can indulge your taste and learn more about, another genre or whatever.
Yeah, and sometimes getting outside of your comfort zone as a writer can be pretty good too.
Yeah.
And book clubs can be kind of fun when one person absolutely hates the book and another person loves it, and they can argue. It's really, really cool. It's really fun drama.
That's the good stuff, right? Like, that's...
Yeah, the conflict. I want to see it.
Yeah.
So good.
We're accustomed to many, like, rejections as a writer, if we're submitting, especially if we're submitting our work. I think we have to be welcome to rejections just, like, in our day-to-day. Like, okay, I didn't find my people this week, but
yeah,
I'm gonna keep putting myself out there the best way I can.
Yeah, definitely. So we've been talking for a little under an hour. Any last thoughts, questions, or comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just say again, like, I think there are many perks, actually, to not living in one of the writer hotspots.
Yeah.
Despite the slog, like, to me, it is so worth it, and I think we just have to keep building the things for ourselves. And maybe if we're the ones who build them, then they're not going to be, like, the shitty versions, We can make them the good, beautiful versions of the scenes we want.
Yeah, and just simply as a reader, too, I appreciate stories that have a specific setting other than New York City. One of our frequent guests and member of our online writing group is a Portuguese guy from Lisbon who hates New York City and every story from it and gets very, very angry, so I think he would be happy and prefer to read more stories that aren't set in NYC or LA, because he gets very, very angry.
I love that.
And he's pretty muscular, so he will fight you. He will fight about this. Okay, New York. A small, hairy European man.
All right, those of you in the hot spots, watch out. He's coming for you.
Yeah. A small little European caveman will come and put you in a headlock if you put your novel in New York City. Anyway, so let us close up. Before we go, where can our listeners find your work and support you?
Thank you so much. I do have a website. It's my first and last name, CassidyMcCants.com. I also have an online literary magazine, Apple in the Dark, and that's just appleinthedark.com.
Nice.
We're about to come out with our summer issue, so going to be some editing here in the next few days. Very excited about that, and then we'll open up submissions soon. Yeah, that's where I am on the interwebs.
Nice. And you're also a member of the New Haven Independent Review crew, so if you want to see some of Cassidy McCants' works, go ahead to the New Haven Independent. They have a whole section called the Review Crew that reviews interesting cultural events from New Haven. Yes, there's some from NYC, but also from other cities, because other cities exist and have a cultural life, and there's a lot of really cool stuff going on.
Yes, huge shout out to New Haven Independent for this.
Yeah, it's super cool that they put this together, and I really hope to see it thrive. Yeah, it's great, and I was really happy to be a part of it, if only for a little while. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This was lovely.
Thanks.
Great.
And thank you all for listening. If you like what you heard, please head to patreon.com/writegud and subscribe. Until next time, keep writing good.
This has been Rite Gud with R.S. Benedict. It was hosted by R.S. Benedict and produced by Matt Keeley for KS Media LLC. Theme song by OK Glass. For comments and concerns, please write to us at writegud@kittysneezes.com. That's RITEGUD@kittysneezes.com. If you'd like to support us, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/writegud. This has been a Kitty Sneezes production.
kittysneezes.com in color.